Hey, Paul, I wanted to talk to you about the NHL trade deadline coming up here. Obviously, tons of chatter outside of the locker room, particularly the Jets need to get a D-man. But you guys have been getting along pretty well so far this season. You're near or at the top of the standings. I want to go to the horse. I want to go to the team. And
you just about called me the horse's ass, didn't you?
Well, I was going to say horse's mouth, but, you can fill in the blanks.
I know what you're thinking, my friend.
So, yeah, where are the Jets at as far as that? Do they feel like they need a D-man?
You can't go into any game feeling you need more ever, right? And that really is important in the room, in the coaching staff, that you've got to have a belief that the group that you have now can win and be solely focused on that, because there's just too long a list of trades that didn't make the team better, guys that step out of nowhere in the playoffs and you sit there and go, oh, thank God, or you get an injury that you think is devastating and some kid comes in and plays, and the next thing you know, your hockey team's better. So the idea, and then making all of the trades that I read about are just so much harder to do than people think, and then I get it, right? Well, we'll just trade this guy for that guy, and it never happens. Why don't they just make that trade, right? So I don't spend any time ever. I mean, I have an opinion on areas that we can improve, for sure, and I will certainly have an opinion on any player whose name comes up, and that Kevin will be active and just as part of all general managers figuring out what's going on around the league. But it won't be any part of my day saying, well, we'll wait for 2 weeks and see what happens, because if we don't get a defenseman in here, we can't win. We're winning hockey games now.
We'll go next to Ted Wyman from the Winnipeg Sun. Go ahead, Ted.
Morning, Paul. Two-part question. Can you just let us know if there's any changes to the lineup tonight? And secondly, does this feel, these series against the same team, especially getting later in the season, does it have a playoff feel?
Yeah, I mean, I think the intensity ramps up for sure. No changes, by the way, Ted. Sorry to the lineup for your first question. Casey Connor's playing tonight. Hellebuck goes in net. There's never the same as a playoff game, right? It's almost impossible to get to that level. And usually I think the fans have a huge part to do with that, right? It's just the fans, and there's so much more energy in the building in a playoff game. And then we don't have any out here. But for sure, you're starting at a different level of desperation in teams, and I would say in our last 4 games, and I would include that the Van game. I mean, they had a bunch of centermen out of their lineup, but they played hard. I mean, this is it, right? We're coming to the 20 game mark. And usually you're talking about, you've already played 60, right? That we're right in the teeth of, and that's where we're at right now. So for Calgary, with that, where they're out, this is a playoff game tonight. And then we have to find a way to get to that energy level, which is a really good testing ground for your hockey team. I'm trying to answer your question honestly. It's not exactly like one, because it's not the same kind of environment around it, but the schedule says it is. That now we're going to get into really heavy games, and I think we're going to see that right down the stretch.
We'll go next to Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet. Go ahead, Sean.
Thanks, Gregor. Hey, Paul. So Helly's going tonight. I know you don't typically make decisions based on the backup and what's best for him, but Lauren clearly would have wanted to have a different outcome in that last game, and so I wonder if, based on that game and based on the importance that he's brought to this team this year, is there any kind of way that you potentially change going forward to try and get him back in sooner so that he doesn't have to sit on the feeling of that last game for too long?
Yeah, you know what? I'm not going to worry about that a whole lot with LB, because I'm just going to look at the most important number. He's got 10 points for us this year. He's had a great save percentage and he's played fantastic. So we're not going to alter what we do, because I don't have that concern. He a tough period, and that's it. And we lost a game, and he made a bunch of other saves. And yeah, he wasn't very happy about it the next day. And then he's going to work real hard. Sometimes giving him enough time to distance himself is also important. So we're not going to change what we have we have a general idea of how the rotation is going to go straight through to the third week in April. You always move it around a little bit, but sometimes based on what we're locked into now, we're going to stick with our plan.
We'll go next to Mitchell Clinton from Jets TV. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Hey, Paul, obviously a season-long road trip comes to an end tonight. You guys are in that stretch of 12 of 14 away from home. So it probably feels like you're at the end of a long run here, but yet you'll come home and you're still playing every other day.
Yeah.
So kind of what's the challenge of seeing this as kind of like, the end of the tunnel, but at the same time, the schedule is kind of unrelenting as it goes.
Yeah. Well, the truth of the matter is that the challenge is going to be our next game, right? Just history tells you that the last game of a long road trip, you usually, and we'll see, but you usually have more energy than you think you would, right? It's the light at the end of the tunnel. The guys are excited about getting home, but you're right. Nothing changes for the next 3 weeks, right? Our first practice will probably be April 19th. It's always that first one back. I think Toronto will have spent the last 3 weeks in their time zone with 2 4-day blocks off, and we're coming off what we're coming off. That will be the challenge.
We'll go next to Kelly Moore from CJOB. Go ahead, Kelly.
Hey, Paul, and this segues nicely into what I wanted to ask you. You're only halfway through the Timex torture test, but a lot of that was spent on the road. So from that perspective, on a scale of 1 to 10, how surprised or delighted are you that you haven't had to tap in to your reserves beyond Logan Stanley to this point? I know you've talked about the travel and that, but did you ever expect in your wildest dreams, that you'd be in this situation that you're in right now?
No. We looked at this as being the critical piece to our season, and we're halfway through it, and that the schedule says, teams that run the number of games that we have to run here for 6.5 weeks, you get banged up, and that may be ahead of us. We may have to deal with that as we go forward here, but to get this far into it and have been to be as healthy as we are, I do think, I said this on the other health question, I think last week, like part of it's luck, right? You've been lucky, but there's some other good things that have gone on here, is having a lineup that you can use everybody, and there isn't a drop off in it. So you're not running 2 lines into the 20-minute mark. It's a lot more easily managed by the players. And then this travel, as brutal as it's been, not getting off the airplane at 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 or 3 times a road trip has been really eye-opening. I mean, we've never done it before. You're never in the same city for 3 games, but it has made it quite a bit more manageable, right? You're not getting into that sleep debt that you can never get out of, which kind of is our life in Winnipeg. With the road travel that we have, there are challenges, right? We don't have a team in our time zone, so we're always flipping time zones, but we've been really fortunate, Kelly, and we just keep our fingers crossed on that.
Just a couple more. We'll go next to Sarah Lesky from TSN. Go ahead, Sarah.
Paul, maybe keeping with that, just when you look at this road trip as a whole going into this final game, how do you feel that your team overall has handled it and performed?
Yeah, I'd like the hockey that we've played. We've had some unusual scores and some really different styles of hockey in terms of the teams. The Eastern teams and the Western teams are still quite a bit different. And we've, gone from one end of the country to the other. So I'm happy with, I think, the learning that we're doing as we go. We seem to be able to understand the games look differently every night. And that isn't a failure on your part to impose your will on other teams. It's the way the game's played. So a certain amount of maturity in our game, we were able to cut off a real tough loss and bounce back and play well. Got our first back-to-back losses of the year, came back and played well. Had almost an unusual game, right? That we haven't had a game like our last one in Calgary. So we're looking to bounce back again. And then at some point between now and tomorrow, we'll be able to get on, weather permitting, we'll be able to get on an airplane and come home.
And final question to Jeff Hamilton from the Free Press. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hey, Paul, I'm sure I'm sure things have changed over your tenure in the NHL, but what does it take to go on a long playoff run in today's NHL, and how might that change or tweak given the circumstances that you're under this season and being in that same division all year and having to come out of that?
All the things. You got to be playing at the right time. You know, your team's got to be feeling good. You got to be fairly healthy. Your goaltender's got to be good, and you've got to be able to go to the well 2 or 3 times, right? You've got to be able to pull out 2 or 3 of those games that things are starting to look rough for you. I don't know is the answer, Jeff. Like, this one's different, right? Because we don't know the other teams in the NHL. It's been I think we've played Florida probably once in the last 2 calendar years, maybe 2.5 years. We don't know any of those other teams. So what's really going to be important, I'm hoping, is what we're going through maybe a little more than other teams. So we have completely different styles of hockey in our division, right? We've got some, you know, we have Calgary and kind of Vancouver, kind of pretty heavy. You've got Edmonton, Toronto, I mean, Ottawa in that. That's a grinding game. And then you've got, you know, Montreal plays kind of a hybrid game in terms of they'll grind you defensively, but it's more based on speed. It's not particularly heavy. And then you've got the 2 offensive, you know, firepower teams that play a different game. So maybe the advantage we might have is we have a spectrum here in our division, and you're going to have to figure out a way to win in all those different kinds of hockey. But boy, it's going to be the team that gets out of the North is going to see a brand new dog it hasn't seen before and see how it goes.